Hello, species value nature system. I'll tell you something. I figured out that a lot of things people miss because of the way I've been looking at it since I was a kid. 5 times when I was a kid, I drank and did stupid things because of it. Only 5 times. Each time recorded, tied to a crime method where I was with strangers, and the exceptions to that, with and as interbranch, I said I was coughing, and recorded for and juxtaposed, overt criminal enterprises in other nations juxtaposed, there and here, as an agreement to the policing of positions for shared with and as a nature that all modern nations took sick, blaming on others, forced to alliances with and as these positions, from tactically denatured relationship to nature, as means having that invested with everyone, areas and states, grown to and as collusion with other nations, as fact treatment nature value, defenses of that as pseudo-positive, and of that as live progression cover up natures, and progressions as tools. The progressions, the standing progression natures needing to offensively pretend not to realize being fake sides of issues. Tied to that, maintain, manifest as defenses, tall areas, worse than not letting finite lies, active body of value lies, and progression value lies, tied to before our founders forced, entrenched, tactically denatured relationship to nature in infrastructure and zoning laws and safety, pseudo-positive used for a terrorism method that is recorded, tied to and as one fluent between overt criminal enterprise, unrealized ones, and original and standing interbranch collusion with and as fact treatment nature victim predators. 2 per space maintain intersciences, intercampuses, on off campuses, criminally foreign influenced interscience together and apart, distinctly and non-distinctly. Obfuscations of the identity that the sciences share, proper fact treatment nature, proper premises nature, treatment nature, pretending to be other. Database stacking, illusion stacking against bodies of correlation capable of discerning other, and with and as that being offensively demonstrated and confessed in conjunction with and as what is consciously maintaining each modern nation, states, and areas motivated to pretend other and other causes, and that's trained to. But Mao was in the same exact lack of free speech that our founders had, because it was entrenched internation here since before our founders' births. They put color in specifically to keep each opinion nature, all kinds of other laws against every single person. Fact treatment nature slavery, I would not deny is worse. I'm trying to say it's still worse because of we're not treating the organized crime method that we share being victim to, because we're blaming on others. We're not because we're not allowing voices, not with opinions, but with demonstration, what is true always, as criminal impositions, offensive, multi-front against each area distinctly and non-distinctly, but each in every modern nation too, recorded blaming on others, because they're forced all shared together. Now, if one starts talking to their nation, they start talking premises, treatments of quality of truth. Now they're already tied into a pseudo-positive defenses of what is untruth together, suit and tie nations and the counters to it too, because they lost the campuses. They lost the ability to be a fair treatment nature as value capable of discerning modern religions. So we come to the hard parts of it, the crazy stay. the means to have to pray, to have quality fact treatment nature let admit it. All is wrong. So I did stupid thing, but before I said it was not an excuse. I mean, just an embarrassing thing to say, but I have to say, but it was, there's a Brian Bowen I do not know at all. Him and people tied to a whole bunch of now active and in recent past confessions and Federal Crime Act roles demonstrated and confessed and threatened, multi-front too, even online. So it's tied, but it's also tied to evidence reception bodies, like with Sandy Hook investigators. In Sandy Hook, I think it's called Thomas Ward Prison, recorded and confessed, involved with crimes with a recently reported sentenced principal sex offender with the same campus. Before that, I tried to report that. Police that had been I didn't even get to talking about their rape threats yet, about the kids in the school. And they arrested me. Because they infected untimely death confessions to me, tied to my campus, tied to someone died reportedly on the campus of Trinity College, recorded and confessed, tied to crimes with the extended family of with police forms and with all kind of investigative reception bodies and people tied to them, and federal criminals associated with them, and sex offenders already at that time tied to the police, former dispatcher and her 2 kids, and the Stop and Shop. I never had a conversation with my life. It was implied and demonstrated with recorded tied Stop and Shop police managers and associates involved with evidence reception bodies on off that area, with interbranch evidence perception crimes with kids, with each age of fact treatment, the same group tied to it as roles with crimes with nursing homes, same actors tied to crimes with inside the court, and then with the informal court crime acts and roles with a method that is hurting each age of fact treatment nature. So one time I was led to a party at the end of the second time I did a senior year, which I wasn't supposed to do over. There was recorded that there's a retired detective and his family in my area with crimes with people that are my age I had nothing to do with, tied to a neighbor that once in a while, they would he was in my same grade, but I never had a classroom except for the exception I noted and middle school, summer school class, also recorded and confessed involved with, with the police department, Joe DeMoro, Joe DeMoro, and I think both their fathers named Joe DeMoro, I don't know. And Tony DeMoro, recorded and confessed involved with crimes with evidence perception bodies with Town Line Mobile and with others like with federal criminals and with interbranch foreign and domestic too, and military like Justin Klavinskis, recorded and confessed involved with this, with crime. They put people in people's classes, database solution stacker. They're stealing people's voices, and they're putting sequence shift roles. So, but in other words, another people, 2 Fienza brothers also, I don't know them, are Fienza and his cousin, and they were also recorded and confessed with crimes with advertising with WFSB police and their family ties and stuff like that, investigator ties with child sex offender clicks and more women behind it, women doctors against the family, with the police are directed to follow a protocol that is recorded in Russia and in America, for example, in these other nations, demonstrably probably in Japan too, with the psychology bridge to what facilitated this originally as pseudo-sophistication natures of modern nations, only capable of discerning identity and relationship to areas and states built reliant upon collusion because of tactically denatured relationship to nature, in that within as are the value of ourselves, when it is positive relationship to itself. But see, this was engineered to keep formal justifications measured as pseudo-sophistication nature caused to negative value nature progressions. As negative value nature like premises saying, oh, that's politics. Worse than dishonestly denying finite active body and value and progressive value discernment of this breaching method space maintained against each age of fact treatment nature, intercampuses, types of campuses, interconcept. This is obfuscating. Is this space maintained? Each science is a pseudo-positive, so they can make mistakes on purpose, because that is the nature that modern nations were only let realize to. Per real sacrifice, real nature in relationship to unnatural, accepted as glorified pseudo-positive by each modern nation. So when people jump up to try to pretend their patriotism by knocking Mao as a communist, they don't even understand. He was born before the Civil War here. Our founders didn't have free speech. The North had George Washington right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. He had to meet in Wethersfield, Connecticut. He had to, right before, with the French general. They could only semi-counter extort what had overt slavery in the North. Internation, specifically forcing England to be the face of it here, so they could keep England forced extorted there, not to make any alliance to survive but through it. The archetypal organized crime, the devil. This is about an organized crime method, a breaching method that is discernible. It's not debatable that is discernible that we worse than didn't explain the breaching method that used slavery. It wasn't for, before it was for money causes. In other words, to say it was for money causes without showing how the money causes were forced as part of the slavery method as a tool, as a breaching tool, to pretend it's on other things. It's for other causes, but in other words, to not let it described what is entrenched since before our founders' births, that they had even high roles with the Constitutional Convention. Then just throw that up and wait for us to tell their tale, to tell their truth out from the tale. Remove, see, and then to remove what it's not as nature's positive way all the way onto itself. That reveals evolution. That reveals means where there were none, and then that reveals the leverage of a different nature of leverage that reveals even unbelievable. Forget the pathology with these weapons. There are no sides to win. One way to begin. Each modern nation fails inherently, actively, and progressively to describe the recorded criminal foreign influences of the infrastructural and nature relationship denatured that each modern nation has. So, this is, in other words, capitalism and communism are recorded with a crime method. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a, what is it? That's part of it, because we have physical delusions with what? Through the science of psychology, recorded, internation shared, tied to courts. They say they're not supposed to talk medical information. But that's had already invested, used to stack database solutions, and with on-off campus, on-off court campus investigators, everyone in collusion, internation here on-off campuses, as per reactions that built that their natures incapable of not reacting this way. This is how everything stays manifest. Before they had cars, they forced these tactically semi-unsafe positions and relationships to worse than extortion of the human fact-cheating nature, tied to how you answer questions about color used by the law. It was per motivations that had every single person a slave, per a tactically denatured relationship to nature that was first used even to instill, to keep Native Americans forced to evaluate nature system positions and defenses of that as positive, that is pseudo-positive, forced. In other words, so you can't even, what Native Americans agreed to is not really, that was forced. It's not really legitimate. In other words, they as each person has the right, like our founders wanted, to have Marbury versus Madison, my Lord, say, true justice must satisfy all appearances of true justice. That means don't fake it. Must satisfy it inherently, actively, and progressively. That reveals areas hurt worst. That reveals suburbs tactically denatured. That reveals states and nations tactically denatured relationship to nature, fact-treatment, nature value to each other, blaming on opinions, physical delusions, because it's not the nature is not the and its relationship to itself, which is another, is the Trinity, each nature of one nature, inherently, actively, progressively value, then further progressively positive or negative, in relationship to what was valued before, then as the finite, then as the active, then as the progressive. So there were crimes recorded and confessed tied to our homeland and foreign shared agencies with and as knaves, with the transition from Aka to Rico, and with and as the value of the such with other nations at the same time, all unrealizing they were defending suit and tie and counter pseudo-positive defenses and glorifications of that training through campuses, nature of shock and awe of each age of fact-treatment nature, recorded methodically, facilitated, motivated by and as the value of states and areas raised, by and as the value of the executive branch originally enforced and still maintained, extorted through how we were forced to share hundreds of nations, sharing policing and not being allowed to tell about that here and there. And then they torture our agents different ways, and they keep the nature, they keep us divided to keep us conquered. There are proofs that it was internation, both against Cuba and against Americans, real or made up, when they when they said that Americans were tortured by sound devices in Cuba. Also recorded and confessed that the apartments on and off campus with Trinity and with with CCSU rather, but connected to the same. What realize we have states and areas interbranch investigators involved with intercampus database solution stacking, pro-crime method tied to what the only context I know him in. And then he non-verbally confirmed, true still as an adult, with crimes with investigative, with evidence perception bodies, interbranch associated with media, distinctly and non-distinctly, with crimes with each age of fact cheap in nature, using Wethersfield Park through time for a crime method where they're lying to whole groups, and they're having them do like it's not for undercover. It's mixed. They're pretending to be undercover training, but they're doing it to steal people's voices, and or to keep them all criminally foreign influenced by keeping them a quality of fact treatment nature as a lie progression, cover up natures and styles as victims, but as victim predators. This is what is behind the problem of overt criminal enterprises, like behind Fox CT. Victim, but victim predator, with directed to insert a former, they said, they reported interacting Los Solitos with the schools. There were also Joey Quest involved would confess and recorded with crimes with schools, with database solution stacking against students, and directing kids, like a bunch of people involved with criminal justice with this tied to a Cololo family. Phil Cololo was recorded and confessed involved with crimes with not letting sexual abuses, verbal and other natures of them, drug crimes and everything with like medical doctors, women stacking lies and databases, the women doctors with the whole family, like a Lethe family there. And they're associated too with, like whole drug cliques where they orchestrate with evidence fabrication natures, foreign and domestic juxtaposed, that are facilitated through areas needing to cover up being knaves with as their value of being evidence perception natures, like associated with the policing of stores through cameras and stuff like that. Those people are associated with other natures of motivations and of criminal foreign influences through their roles with drugs, with hospital cliques, and connections to that shared with our policing, with psychology tied to courts, where they have recorded crime and confessed crime methods where the courts won't let anyone talk, and they won't let their recorded crime acts and crime methods reported, and because they're doing it with doctors that are pretending they had conversations with people. If you catch them dead cold with a crime method through kids through time, like with the girl I don't know her name yet. Now I don't know how old she is. But other kids associated with on and off campus with worse crimes than but tied to the principal sex offender just sentenced. And they hid this by wire crimes and by hiding the police rape threats and evidence crimes and all kinds of natures of juxtaposed crimes, evidence crimes, database crimes, intercity through time, and worse than interstate. They also recorded and confessed involved with federal criminals that were recorded, proven, and further recorded tied to sequence shift in the Ninth Circuit in Manhattan, and from the Trade Center context that made things appear late to a panel of 3 judges. That was proven. That led to a 2006 case with federal criminals that had crime roles with crime acts with kids in my grade and with a daughter and with other kids, and then that was exploited when another one was adult, like Allison Mulcahy. I never had anything to do with her in my life. She was confessed and recorded by, tied to crimes confessed and recorded by my school, tied to a Mike Domain, and to his placement in my classroom, tied to the placement of Senator Larson's relative in a algebra class. And there was an arrest of me, I think, too, when I was in that class that year. And it was also recorded and confessed, tied to crimes recorded and confessed, tied to drugs with the kids, with the police, and with the courts involved through time. Other natures of crimes too, tied to Anthony Agnew, and to a Fred Grisette, and to classes before that, and to confessions of Phil Collo. But I still didn't know who he was yet, Phil Collo. And a Subby Scalora also. Those are recorded and confessed. The Subby Scalora that Joe DeMoro and Ray Close, that was their cousin. I never saw them in the same place at the same time. I only saw that person trying to pretend he had a conversation with me. He knew me. He's tied also behind my back into my family. They did this with Phil Collo. Heather Hansen recorded and confessed, involved since she was a kid. Child abused by investigators, recorded and confessed, involved with crimes with her, directing her now to crimes with other kids indifferent to it and worse because of her relationship to suburban home, to real estate. My parents, the real estate company, before they sold it, also recorded and confessed, tied to terrorism acts with people associated with the hospital. And I still don't know what happened to my father yet. They recorded and confessed abusing and with because the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, was a co-defendant of the federal criminals, one with the daughter in my grade, and with others with the drug crime rolls and evidence crime rolls growing up. So one time I found myself at the end of a year party, the second time I did a year, but because of a speech class, both speech teachers recorded and confessed involved with the detectives retired and standing involved with the sex offender cliques and the former police dispatcher. And there's Matt Provost. I never had a conversation with him in my life. He was implied tied to the sex offenders clique with the police forms tied to these internation families through time. And Mike Pandolf, because this is intercampus, they made problems with the same sex offender over here tied to the same cliques with on-off campus CCSU Trinity. And they're doing this progressively because it was on-off campus police recording and confess involved. Everyone's switching names, each branch, deans switching names. And there's no place to get a response. So we're going to need the Attorney General too.